Hello, everybody. Welcome to day 3 of our Pollinator Power Party. We hope you joined us for Monday and Tuesday, but if you didn't, you can watch us on YouTube at EPRI's YouTube channel, and today's will also be posted there. So today is Be My Honey Day. We have some remarkable speakers today. One that's going to go, Amina Harris is going to talk us through honey tasting, and we're going to taste some honey with a special guest from the studio audience to tell us what he thinks about honey tasting, a teenager. And then we have a deeper scientific lecture from Alino Nino at UC Davis. And both are going to be participating in the chat with us today. Yesterday, you guys blew up the chat. It went crazy. And it was so much fun to see you posting questions and then asking each other questions, and then you guys answered it. It was actually a really legitimate virtual chat. So that was awesome. Keep doing that today. Don't be shy. Jump in there. We're all going to help each other out, learn about pollinators. And then we also have a couple of polling questions today that we'll go through at the end to kind of talk a little bit more about some of the content from yesterday, and then also get into some of the details and kind of reflect on some of the deeper thoughts on bees and honey after the lecture today. 2 winners from yesterday. We have Oma Ackers and then Morgan Skalinsky. You guys joined the party yesterday. Congratulations. You were randomly drawn, and we are going to be shipping you the Wings of Life poster, which is the same graphic that's on the front of the t-shirts that you may have seen on our website. So good job. You're going to get a poster. Joining every day this week, you all, if you join every day, you're going to be entered to win the grand prize drawing, including the daily drawings as well. So congratulations to those 2 winners. And we're going to hear dispatches from the field from American Electric Power and Ameren today to kind of keep telling stories about what these large land managers are doing to both bring us electricity that is safe and affordable, so we always have power at the plug, while they're also thinking about what they can do for pollinators. So some really neat stories today. Okay, so I'll see you back here at the end of the content. I'll be in the chat with you. Let's get this party started.
Obscure pollinator is the blue orchard mason bee, Osmia lignaria. Blue orchard mason bees are fascinating because they are all blue in color, and instead of carrying pollen on their legs like many other bee species, they carry it on their bellies. They also nest in holes and use clay to make partitions to seal their nest. This unique mud-building behavior leads to their common designation as masons. Native bees, like the blue orchard mason bees, are very efficient pollinators of native crops. There are 140 species of Osmia in North America, and they are all known for visiting fruit trees, such as apples, plums, pears, almonds, and peaches. The blue orchard bee is prized for its efficiency in pollinating fruit trees and is one of the few native pollinators that has managed in agriculture. By being solitary, each female bee tends to its own brood instead of having a queen and worker bees as seen in bumblebee and honeybee colonies. They also seem to like the company of others of their kind and happily build their nests next to each other.
Sandy, welcome to Franklin Park Conservatory and Botanical Gardens. The Conservatory's mission is inspired by horticulture. We strive to elevate the lives of our community through cultural, social, and educational experiences.
Jenny, when I think about Franklin Park Conservatory's mission and vision, I think about AEP, and I'm going to go back to 1934 to our AEP company creed, where a former president, George Tidd, said that we are citizens of every community that we serve and how important it is to be good stewards of those communities. So when I think about what Franklin Park Conservatory is doing, that is so much in alignment with our values and what we want to be in the communities.
And I think about how supportive AEP's been with the conservatory. We have over 380,000 guests each year, and it allows us to do the education, to get people connected with these plants, and we learn from each other. Like, we are always surprised the research projects that you're doing, the conservation work across the United States.
We are acutely aware of the potential impacts that we can have on wildlife and ecosystems. And so that mindset of environmental stewardship and conservation is really important to us. And I'm really proud of our environmental team at AEP, the transmission team, really thoughtful about planning and maintaining and how we restore that land once we're done with it.
Our investors and stakeholder groups also want to know how we're managing biodiversity at New Albany, which is a vegetation demonstration site. So when we have a customer that wants something special on their property, we show them what they can do that's compatible. So we have plots showing pollinators, we have a plot that supports birds. We have a facility in Arkansas, our Flint Creek Power Plant, where they maintain a prairie, a native prairie. Another really nice one is our Apple Blossom Wind Farm project in Michigan. And up there, the property manager planted a couple acres of pollinators, and it's just gorgeous.
I think about the way we plant here at the conservatory, and I also think about homeowners. And when I think about creating a pollinator-friendly environment, the first thing I think about is know your insects. The majority of our insects are beneficial. They're not harmful.
I think your role, as an organization at the conservatory is just to educate the people about that. And the one thing you're going to hear a lot about is 3 and 3. 3 different species of blooming flowers at 3 times of the year, spring, summer, fall. Go native, they're going to survive better, they're regionalized to your area. Purples and blues do better to attract bees. The yellows and whites may actually be healthier for butterflies. And you don't have to spend a lot of money.
Be judicious with chemicals. Look at soap sprays. This is what we do at the conservatory. Soap sprays. We use neem oil. One of the things we love to do best is educate our visitors, especially our school groups. Each year we have about 20,000 school children come through for programming here at the conservatory. We start them out with a metamorphosis lab, because metamorphosis is a pretty abstract concept, and it might be a little hard to understand, but to see it in action, it brings everything together. We have our Blooms and Butterflies exhibit. When you walk through there, it's just beautiful, right? The sun is shining through the glass house. There's palm trees everywhere and tropical plants and butterflies. And then we head outside to our children's garden, where we have our pollen makers and mover garden, where we can talk about our native pollinators in that space. We have an emergent center out there where we collect some monarch chrysalis, painted ladies, swallowtails, so the kids can also experience that.
Yet to see a kid that didn't like a bug. We've taken them to one of our former power plants that did sweep netting. Right, they're out there with the nets, and then they bring them in to show us what they got, and they just love it.
Experiential learning. I think it sticks with you, and I feel that between our organizations, we're probably creating some great ambassadors for the environment. Don't you think so?
I hope so.
I do too.
Yes.
Today, Ameren, Illinois is working with Pheasants Forever to plant a pollinator-friendly installation. It's 4 acres, and it's comprised of milkweeds and flowers that will support monarch butterflies and bees and other pollinator species. Projects like this are important for many reasons, one of them being pollinator population support. It can provide monarch butterflies host plants such as the milkweed so that they can lay their eggs and the hatchlings can feed on those plants and we get more monarch butterflies. Also, the nectar providing plants support the adults as well as bee species in the area and other pollinators. There is also a cost savings component because when we install plants like this, we have less of the larger incompatible woody vegetation that we need to spend money on managing for safety and reliability. So in the end, we can save monies and pass those savings on to our customers.
Our Ameren, Illinois power lines are actually a great site for the butterfly because we can put the food that they need. It shelters them from any cars that can come up and down the right of way. And you have lines that run north to south, from the northern expanse of Illinois all the way to the south expanse, and that just creates quality, safe lines for those butterflies to migrate each year.
The future of a project like this is really ongoing and where feasible. Currently, Ameren, Illinois has over 175 acres of pollinator-friendly plantings such as this, and this one will be 4 acres. And wherever we're able to plant more, we're going to do so.
What I learned from pollinators today is that a lot of pollinators are like very, very helpful for the planet, and like they could help our planet a lot. And it's sad that they're getting endangered, right?
My favorite pollinator is bumblebee because they're really fluffy and they're really cute.
I learned how there's over 5,000 species of bees in the USA, and I thought there was only 3. And I learned how a lot of them are very helpful, how when they carry the pollen, it can grow fruits and vegetables that we eat.
I learned that bees are only vegetarian and they don't they don't pollinate flowers on purpose. They just get it and then they accidentally rub it off on flowers. They're important because they make honey. I agree with her.
I'm Amina Harris, and I'm director of the Honey and Pollination Center right here, along with a few other things growing. We like to talk about the pollinators here in the garden, and it's specifically planted just to attract native pollinators and honeybees, butterflies, all kinds of wonderful things. But today we're going to focus on honey tastings. So we're going to start today with orange blossom honey from Southern California. Orange blossom honey comes from the area around Fresno on south to Bakersfield. And when bees are happy, they're going to produce a beautiful, beautiful orange blossom like we have here in the jar. You can go to the bookstore and buy one of these 3-jar samplers, and it'll have one each of our honeys. And then you can do this all at home. So the first thing you need are some plastic spoons. I like to use little ones because we don't need a whole big taste. But this orange blossom honey is so special, you're going to love it once you smell it. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to keep our little spoon close at hand. We're going to open the jar and we're going to take a sniff. You're going to smell orange blossoms just like they smell outside your door in the middle of the spring as they start to bloom. It's just amazing. In addition, you get a little hint of jasmine on the scent. Next, we're going to take our spoon and we're just going to stir it a teeny little bit and put not a whole lot of honey on there. Because if you put too much honey, you're not going to taste it as well as you might if there's just a little. You're going to put it on your tongue and you're going to let the smell just roll around inside your mouth. The first thing you actually get in your mouth is the smell. That comes up through the back of your mouth and into your nose. And the aroma is fabulous. So now we're tasting that. It's really, really wonderful. You can taste the orange blossoms, you can taste the little jasmine, and there's even sort of a hint of candied orange peel. It's very, very intense and very, very sweet. This is a wonderful honey for using if you want to put it into a tea like Earl Grey where you've got bergamot in there and the smell comes up. It's really terrific. So here we are inside one of the many, many lemon trees here at the Robert Mondavi Good Life Garden. And the reason I'm standing here is because lemon trees help make wonderful citrus honey. I wanted to show you one of the cool things that happens with the lemon tree. So you can see down below there's a very, very ripe little lemon. But up here you can see these lemons are just starting to turn yellow. We've got these wonderful little babies growing up. Now every lemon tree will almost always have 3 stages of lemons happening at any given time. And in this case, we've got some blossoms getting ready to pop open. Now we're going to move on to our next honey. The next one is going to be coriander from Yuba City. Now, this is a very different crop. This is a really unusual honey. It's a seed crop. It's planted just for its seed up in Yuba City. And lots of bees are put around the outside perimeter of the fields, so they have a wonderful crop to go to. This crop is pure coriander. So when you think about hiking maybe in the foothills and you step on some wild coriander, you get that smell. You can only imagine what it will smell like. So this is not a sweet honey like orange blossom. You're going to experience something very, very different. So when you smell it, you smell a mixture of spices. You smell cardamom, you smell ground coriander, you smell a little bit of chocolate, some licorice, all kinds of different things. It was once described to me as mole in a jar, and another time like a spice bazaar. But it's a totally unique honey. It's not sweet, it's savory first. And I think you'll find it really amazing. Next, we're going to dip in the spoon, take a taste, let it roll around inside your mouth again. You're going to smell that wonderful licoricey, chocolatey flavor that's there. The sweet is almost non-existent. This honey is terrific when you're making tomato sauces and you need to do a little bit of just tempering down the acid of the tomatoes. It's really good in salad dressings. Terrific complement for all kinds of savory dishes. When you want something sweet, you don't have to use sugar. You should be using coriander honey. Barbecue sauces, you name it, it's fabulous. So here we are by a pomegranate tree, just setting out its leaves for the first time this spring. Very soon it's going to set these beautiful deep red blossoms. And when the blossoms open, honeybees just cram inside them to get all the juicy nectar they can. When pomegranates produce a honey, and we don't get too much pomegranate honey in this world, but when it does, it is incredibly fruity. You can almost taste the grenadine that pomegranate seeds become. It's really a wonderful, sweet, flavorful, and fruity honey. The pomegranates, the lemons, all the different things that are created here in the garden are for our students' benefit. Those who are food insecure are able to go to campus and get some of these fruits and vegetables for their own use at home. For our last honey, we're going to try some wildflower honey from here in Northern California. This is the UC Davis honey. This is the honey that is collected from all over the area in about a 50-mile radius. So just imagine every single spring bees are collecting something that tastes a lot like this one. This one's going to have a hint of flowers, a hint of fruit, and really a lot of orange blossom in it because oranges grow all over California. So first we're going to take a sniff. And what you smell is a whole lot of different, just so very different. It's not real floral like the orange blossom. It's not savory like the coriander. It's more of a blend of everything. It's just got a little bit of everything going on in it. And when we take a taste, this one's really silky on the tongue. It's very, very fruity and a little bit floral all at the same time. Now, one of the things that's also happening in here is that it's crystallizing. All natural honey will crystallize in time. It's something we should all be aware will happen. It's not a bad thing. Honey hasn't gone bad. It's just crystallizing. It's what it wants to do. You can use it anyway. These are all kinds of the amazing things that you can figure out and taste when you go to the bookstore and get your own little jar. When you're there, you may want to think about a few other things that you could use. We have a honey wheel. Honey wheel was designed here at UC Davis. It's got 99 different words to help you describe honey. You thought there was only one, right? Sweet? Well, think again. Here's 99 different possibilities. And not only are there sweet honeys, there's sour honeys, there's floral honeys, there's fruity honeys, all different kinds. And you can find the words that help you describe them right here. If you really, really love honey, you might want to get a honey journal. And a honey journal helps you keep track of everything you've ever tasted. You can just fill it out and you'll remember what you had once before. So it's a really great way to keep track of all the different honeys you might have picked up when you're traveling, different people bring to you, and that you can enjoy.
Okay, so Amina, we just saw your video showing us, teaching us how to taste honey, and I feel like I discovered you. Like you are the honey guru, like of the world. So how long have you been working with honey?
I have actively been involved with varietal honey, which is very different than just plain old honey in its own way. I've been active in varietal honey since 1980, so it's been a long time.
So when we were first talking about this, the pollinator party, and you asked me what was my favorite honey, and I said, I don't know. And you said, oh my goodness, you don't know your favorite honey, right?
Yeah, and
then you shipped me a whole bunch of honey. Who's your name?
Tristan.
Tristan. Okay, so Tristan, the first honey is Northwestern buckwheat. Okay, so take a little bit. So does he take a huge spoonful?
First he sniffs it. Have him smell it first and tell me what you smell, Tristan. You should smell it too, Jessica, just in case.
Oh.
It reminds me of like sap.
Sap.
Sap. That's interesting. When you said, oh God, okay, you've got a much more visceral response. What is it?
It smells not yummy.
Does it smell a bit like a barnyard?
Yeah, like fermenting something.
So this is a honey that really, if you're paying attention, it's got a lot of molasses flavor, a lot of date flavor, but it's got that incredible in the nose face thing going on, and you're going, oh God. So what's interesting about it is this is a honey that's produced all over the world. Anywhere where they grow buckwheat, it's like a cover crop. Oh, you got to smell it first, Tristan. You cheated.
I did.
And nice and sweet. What do you think?
A little too sweet.
Too sweet.
Some people feel that about. So now blow it out your nose. Get a little teeny bit on your tongue. Let it get all around your tongue, and then blow it out your nose so that you can get the full aroma of it.
Okay, let's try the last one. So this is Northwestern meadow foam.
Right.
You gotta smell it, yes.
This is becoming America's favorite honey.
Yeah, so my question was, how do you know what flower each honey's from? Like, wouldn't it all get mixed up? Like when the bees pollinate, how do you separate the flowers to the different honeys?
Right, so that's a really great question, and I get asked that one a lot. And you can't always know, but essentially what's going on, if you're working with a really, really good beekeeper, the beekeeper will move their bees into an area to collect a certain variety of honey. And that those bees they talk to each other and tell each other, they don't actually talk. They do a dance and they give each other directions, and it tells them how to go back to the same place over and over again. So for instance, at Orange Blossom you had lots and lots of beekeepers move their bees into the oranges after almond season is over, because the bees need something to forage on. Strangely enough, oranges don't need to be pollinated by honeybees, but they get better fruit when they are. And there's all kinds of things about moving your bees, but you move them into the orchard about a week before the bloom is really going to get huge. And the bees, you open your hive, the bees fly out and they land in these trees right nearby, and they go, oh, wow, this is really terrific. Look at all the nectar here. And they go back to the hive, and the foragers that come back in do a tap dance, sort of, to explain where they went to get this amazing nectar. And then the bees go to that nectar source over and over and over again. So you have to be inside an area that is acre upon acre upon acre. It's not just one orange tree in your backyard or 2 orange trees in your backyard. It takes an acre of forage for every single hive every single day. So to collect orange blossom honey, you need a huge, huge area. I mean, gargantuan. Bees produce much more than they can possibly eat. They have their own life cycle and their own situation, but they can't stop working. So when we say you're as busy as a bee, we really mean bees are busy because they can't stop. They don't take a nap even, barely. I mean, they rest, but they barely slow down. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you.
So each managed bee box, and this is all Apis mellifera, so this is all honeybee you're talking about?
Right, right.
So each box, so in general, they forage on about 1 acre?
Yeah, each needs at least an acre. And then, of course, in the summer...
The honeybee has a 25-mile... Don't they have a 25-mile fly distance?
They actually can fly up to about 5 miles. So they'd be going from the hive of about 5 miles, which is 87 square miles from the hive. So it actually becomes a huge area, which is why if you're collecting for a certain, if you're trying to get a certain variety, you want to make sure there's enough to keep them home and, keep them in that area where everything is, which is why it's a little bit, when someone says, oh, I'm collecting, and they'll name some kind of floral tree they have in their yard, which may or may not even produce the nectar. And
right.
No, actually, you're not. Your bees that's a part of their wildflower mix because they're going out and they're collecting a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And
so what do you think about the honey? Like if I go to Costco and I buy Northern California organic honey from Costco, what do you think about that type of just blend? Does that mean anything to you? Because these are the ones you sent me are orange blossom and meadow foam and all that. So wildflower is just non-specific foraging area?
Right. So some wildflowers are fabulous and some wildflowers are yucky. It kind of depends what the natural mix is or how the packer produces it. But you said something really important to note, and that is you said organic Northern California wildflower. That doesn't exist. There is no such thing as certified organic honey in the continental U.S. The only place that there is any certified honey from the U.S. is a small area of the Big Island of Hawaii. And that's because it was grandfathered in before the organic system came into being. All honey that's labeled organic here in the United States is from offshore. And we do not ask those countries to show us how they are proving the organic certification. So honey that comes from all over South America, Vietnam, Africa, India, pretty much anywhere may be labeled organic, and we can't prove that it really is or it isn't.
Let's say, Tristan, he leaves the honey out, he puts it in his room, right? Because his room, things get lost in his bedroom. So let's just say he takes one of these jars of honey and he stores it in his room and stashes it away. Then some years later, he's off to college or has his kids or whatever, and I find this jar of honey. Will it be rotten?
No, honey doesn't rot. It's a pure supersaturated sugar, and so unless water is introduced to it, it pretty much doesn't go bad. It may lose its flavor, it may get dark, it'll still be sweet, but it's not going to go bad. They've actually found honey in the tombs in Egypt, and that honey wasn't bad. It may not be something you want to cook a delicate cheesecake with, but you wouldn't die eating it. As soon as you add water to honey, it starts to ferment. And so then you're on your way to making an alcoholic beverage called mead. But if you do it appropriately, you end up with a good beverage. If you just let it sit there, you're not going to want to drink that much.
And what about bumblebees? Is there any honey that is on the market that's from bumblebees?
Bumblebees are the only other bee, I mean, until we get into, orchid bees and everybody else, bumblebees are the only other North American bee that produces kind of a honey, and they live socially. All the others are single. They live all alone. They dig their little holes in the ground or in the wood of your house or somewhere else. But bumblebees actually live in colonies of up to about 250 or more bees, and they have a queen in the same way, and they're usually in the ground. And they do produce a honey, but I don't know anybody who would collect it. It would seriously be very dangerous, and they need it. Those bees need their honey. They're not in the excess. They're not like Apis mellifera, who have sort of figured out how to just keep, it's their DNA that just tells them to keep building in the way they build. And the same with the bumblebee. But they do collect honey, and they are underground. But we don't collect it.
So so for the regular honey, when we take the honey, we're not killing those bees in the hive and making them starve?
Hopefully not. Most beekeepers do not want that to happen. It's a huge amount of time and effort to actually rebuild your hives every year, and that's one of the issues going on right now with all of the various, all these different things happening with what people are terming colony collapse disorder, but really which is a whole bunch of different health issues that have come together in this, I want to call it a perfect storm, but it's a really terrible storm that came together. And so generally, you're not going to take more honey away from a beehive than the bees need to survive. In a place like California, where I live now, it gets so hot in the summer that if you even want to get your bees through the summer, you have to water them, and you also have to figure out a way to get them forage, because there just isn't a lot of things in bloom. When it gets so hot, it just dries up here. It looks like, we just came out of a toaster oven. And so the bees see that too, and then so beekeepers often give them a sugar syrup to just help them get through the season. And then as soon as fall hits and things start to bloom, the bees can start to collect again. But generally, you're not going to take away food that the bees need. They have to have their pollen, and they have to have their honey. They eat both pollen and honey, and they eat them at different times in their life cycle.
Well, gosh, so Amina, thank you so much for teaching us, how to taste honey, and helping me discover what my favorite honey is. I have to decide. I don't think it's the buckwheat, though.
I don't either.
I'm going to go with one of the other ones.
Hello, everyone, and happy Pollinator Week. I'm really excited to be here with you today to tell you a little bit about my favorite pollinator, which is the honeybee. My name is Elena Nino. I'm a cooperative extension specialist with University of California, and my expertise is in apiculture. And for those of you who might not be familiar with this term, it simply means beekeeping. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of beekeeping and honeybees, though, I want to remind everybody why we're here this week, and that is to celebrate pollinators. Pollinators are essential for reproduction of a majority of the flowering plants throughout the world. And in fact, about 75% of the food crops require or benefit from animal pollinator services. And when I say pollinator, your brain might automatically think bees. However, it's important to note that there's a great diversity of pollinators, and those include bats, hummingbirds, butterflies, other animals that are capable of carrying pollen on their bodies from flower to flower. There's also great diversity of bee species, and in fact, we estimate that there are about 20,000 different bee species in the world. And if you are living in California, you might encounter one of approximately 1,500 different bee species residing here when you're out on your walk. These bees have very different life histories and behaviors, and one of the notable behaviors is their sociality. Honeybees, you might already know, have what we call eusocial organization. This means that they have reproductive division of labor, they have cooperative brood care of young, and they also have overlapping generation within their nest. And in fact, when the honeybees get really crowded within their nest, they communicate with each other and they tell each other that it's time to make a new colony. So they will bud off, and you will see this as a swarm oftentimes in the springtime on trees when you're walking by and out on your walks. The ball of bees that you see is just a subset of an old colony that's looking for a new place to nest. However, it's important to note the majority of the bees are actually solitary and they don't form the groups of bees. They actually live on their own. So what happens with that swarm of honeybees? Well, the swarm of honeybees has what we call scouts. They go out and search for a new nest. Because honeybees are cavity nesting species, they will oftentimes find hollowed out trees that are of the correct size that will serve as the new nest. And in fact, about 30% of the bees are cavity nesting, where the rest of the bees are actually ground nesting and will live in the ground. So why is all of this important to know? Well, it is important because it allows us to actually harness the power of pollinators for pollination services. And there are in fact now a few bees that are used in commercial pollination, such as bumblebees, blue orchard bee, alfalfa leaf-cutting bee, alkali bee, and of course, honeybee. Honeybee or Apis mellifera is still considered a primary managed pollinator of crops. So what makes them so successful when it comes to pollination? Well, honeybee colonies have a really high number of individuals. Oftentimes they will grow to have approximately 50 to 60,000 individuals, which means that they often have a large number of foraging individuals. They can also be easily picked up and moved once they're in their hives. They can be moved from crop to crop. They can also be moved or covered if need be for a variety of management practices for the crops. Honeybees are also generalists, which means that they will pollinate a number of different plants, and they exhibit resource constancy, which ensures that they will remain on the crop that they're brought in to pollinate. In addition to pollination, we also benefit from honeybees in other ways. They can provide honey and wax for us, and in fact, they produce wax and use it to build their nests. They will also collect pollen and propolis. Propolis is plant resin that the bees will bring into the colony, and they will actually use it as what we call bee glue to plug up any holes that might be present inside the colony. We can also harvest royal jelly from the honeybees, and you might have seen this in the health food stores. And royal jelly are the glandular secretions that the honeybees use to feed their brood. Let's get back to pollination. The largest pollination event in the world is said to be the almond pollination, which happens starting in mid-February in California. There are about 1.3 million almond acres, and California produces about 80% of world almond supply. Each one of those acres is recommended to have 2 colonies for pollination, which means that in California, we have a really large number of colonies in February, oftentimes starting as early as October. So what happens when the almond pollination is done? Well, it really depends on the beekeeper, and there's a variety of routes that these beekeepers take. A lot of them will go into Midwestern states to start producing honey. A lot of them will also go to other crops to pollinate those crops. Some of them, especially the ones that are remaining here in California, will produce, for example, packages. So you can purchase packaged bees and start your own colony. A lot of them will actually produce queens, and they will sell those queens throughout the country and into other countries as well. So when we're talking about honeybees and pollination, you might be thinking, oh, hives. And you often might see these boxes on the side of the road, which were provided there by beekeepers to pollinate a variety of different crops. However, what we really want to know is what is inside these boxes. And what's inside the boxes are individuals. So inside the box, inside the hive, we have a colony consisting of thousands of workers, which are shown here. They're the smallest bee here. We also have a small number of drones, particularly in the springtime, and these are male bees. And then, of course, we have a queen, and the queen is the large individual that has a triangular shaped abdomen. The queen is also the only one that is capable of producing other female eggs or laying other female eggs. Workers cannot reproduce. In addition to adults, we also, of course, have developing young. We call developing young brood. The white is what we call open brood, and these are developing larvae. And the wax-capped brood is what we call cap brood. And underneath, we will find pupae. And here's a closer look at what the larvae, eggs, pupa, and adult look like. When the adult emerges from the cell, it spends the first approximately 20 days in the colony as a house bee, and it's responsible for any number of tasks within the colony, such as building of the nest and the comb, cleaning of the cells, care of brood, accepting nectar, converting it to honey, accepting pollen and storing it as bee bread, guarding of the hive, as well as climate control. And eventually, at about 3 weeks of age, the workers will transition into foragers. And the foragers are the bees that go out and collect pollen and nectar. They also collect water and propolis. They bring it back into the colony. Pollen is fed to the brood. Nectar is used for overwintering storage of carbohydrate sources. And what's really unique and really neat about bees, they're able to communicate. And while majority of their communication is done by pheromones, which are chemicals used by animals to essentially talk to each other, bees can also communicate via dance. And they have two predominant types of dance. One is the round dance that communicates that there is a food source nearby. And then they also have a more complex and more complicated waggle dance, which can tell colonies and other foragers where the food source is many, many meters away from the hive. In some cases, honeybees will travel upwards of 5 miles to get to the food source. And while honeybees are really neat and really cool, they also have some issues such as other pollinators do. So this is a graphic showing the colony losses starting in 2008. So for the past 13 or 12 years or so. US managed honeybee colony loss estimates are done by the Bee-Informed Partnership in collaboration with the USDA, which is the United States Department of Agriculture. And what they found was that the beekeepers have been reporting upwards of about 45% colony losses annually at some years, which is really a tremendous loss to the beekeepers and the beekeeping industry. And it really has a great economic impact on beekeepers and agriculture in general. So of course, the big question is, what are the issues that are facing beekeepers and honeybees, and what are some of these causes of colony loss? So the Bee-Informed Partnership has also surveyed beekeepers on what they think their colonies were lost due to. And the majority of the beekeepers, whether they had down below 50 colonies or upwards of 500 colonies or more, have reported varroa mites as one of the biggest issues and causes of colony loss, as well as queen issues and queen quality issues. In some cases, that was starvation. Other cases, that was brood disease or other parasites such as nosema, which is a microsporidium that essentially starves the bee. So you can see that honeybees and beekeepers have quite a few issues to deal with, much like other pollinators. So the goal of my lab and many other researchers, not just at UC Davis, but throughout the state as well as throughout the country, is to continue characterizing these various biotic and abiotic stressors that are affecting colony health in order to inform development of solutions for bees and bee health as well as beekeepers. So in my lab, we work on a number of these issues, and really our research goals are driven by the needs of our stakeholders, which are predominantly beekeepers, as well as growers and pesticide applicators. So I have students and postdocs who have spent a lot of time trying to understand what are the factors that are affecting queen quality and how the queen quality can be improved, because as you remember, the second factor that the beekeepers are still reporting is issue leading to colony loss are issues with queen health and quality. We are still learning about these different factors, and we're trying to develop solutions, and admittedly so, it will probably take some time, as a lot of research often does. However, in the meantime, I have a student, Lauren Russert, who is evaluating different bee stocks for their resistance to varroa mites. So in the past several years and longer, researchers and beekeepers have been working together on developing different bee stocks specifically for their resistance and tolerance for varroa mites, which are really a number one, if you ask beekeepers, number one issue that is facing them in terms of being able to support their colonies. What Lauren has found that some of these different bee stocks, in fact, do have higher tolerance or resistance to varroa mites as compared to some of the other stocks that were evaluated. So there are some promising outcomes from breeding of bees that are specifically resistant to varroa mites. While we're waiting on those results and trying to really work on developing other tools for battling varroa mites, we have been working with several different researchers in evaluating novel and improved varroicides, specifically biomiticides, for safety and efficacy against varroa. And some of these have come to the market. For example, Formic Pro is one of them, which is the formic acid used to control varroa mites. We also know from a number of research groups that having access to diverse forage can greatly help support honeybee health and other bee health. So we're working in collaboration with my colleague, Dr. Neil Williams, to better understand how these supplemental forage plantings, specifically in agricultural areas, can benefit both native bees and honeybees. And we have indeed found that if there's access to supplemental forage of these colonies, they will actually grow faster and they will be stronger going into the winter time. They will also survive longer. In addition to understanding how we can better improve the agricultural environment, we also are working on research, understanding what are some of the ornamental plants that can be used in urban gardens, for example, that will be supportive not just to honeybees, but also to other wild bees as well. And we have some really great results. And I would invite you to go and visit the UC Davis Bee Haven website, which has a list of plants that could be possibly planted in your own garden as well. Because we know that nutrition can play such a huge beneficial role in supporting honeybee health, we also are thinking about how we can improve supplemental feed for the honeybees. So one of the things that the beekeepers are currently really interested in is whether probiotics can actually help with colony management and specifically with disease management. We have been working with our colleagues from Canada in understanding whether these probiotics can actually help not only in a laboratory setting, but also in a colony setting. And we have indeed found that when we use these specific probiotics, they can lead to increased colony survivorship, colony growth, and even help reduce some of the brood diseases within the colony. We're also using a similar principle and trying to understand what happens if we feed a variety of phytochemicals, such as p-coumaric acid, for example. What happens if we feed these phytochemicals to the honeybees, and we have found that they can also benefit from being provided certain phytochemicals that are actually naturally found in nectars as well. Another project in collaboration with Dr. Williams is modeling potential risks within the ag landscapes in California specifically. So we're using the pesticide use data that is available through CDPR, which is the Department of Pesticide Regulation in California, to understand what are the immediate potential risks to the bees within the agricultural landscape environments. And this is with the idea that we are able to provide this information to a variety of stakeholders, such as growers and other land managers, to be able to modify, if necessary, their management practices that will help support wild bee and honeybee health as well. And the big question really is, in addition to understanding what the risks are, how can we help improve the environment and safety of that environment for the bees? So again, not just honeybees, but native bees and wild bees as well. So I'm collaborating with my colleagues, Dr. Vanette and Dr. Truias, and we have been working on identifying biorational pesticides for crop management. Specifically, in this case, we are working on understanding how we can better manage almond diseases with using microorganisms that are already present in the environment without harming the honeybees, of course, and other bees. So what is really interesting and really neat about this is that some of these biorational pesticides could actually be placed on the plants by using honeybees. So the idea is that we can use these microorganisms, put them in a powder, put them in front of a bee, and in this case we see here bumblebees, but put them in front of the beehive entrance. The bees will walk through it, pick it up on their hairs, fly to the individual flowers, and deliver the biopesticide, thereby leading to the control of the pathogens. So this is a really neat and really cool and potentially really valuable new system, and we call it apivectoring. This moment, I would just like to acknowledge a number of people who have worked on a variety of these different research projects, and of course, a number of funding agencies that have contributed and supported these different projects. I would also like to mention that in addition to research, my laboratory group is also responsible for education. So we have developed the first ever California Master Beekeeper program, which uses science-based information to educate stewards and ambassadors for honeybees and beekeeping. And I invite you to come and visit us online. We have a wonderful website. If you Google us, you'll be able to get more information. And if you're interested in getting involved, please feel free to contact us. And probably my most favorite thing to do is to work with kids and provide education for the children. So we have developed with this idea that the children are our future, of course. We have developed a pollinator education program, which is ran from the UC Davis Bee Haven. I would, of course, like to thank you for joining me here today and learning a little bit more about honeybees. And if you have any questions for me, please feel free to contact me via email. My email address is at the bottom, and it is elnino@ucdavis.edu. Thank you.
Hey, Alina, that was an excellent lecture. Thank you for sharing that. You are doing some really amazing research in your lab. And I just wanted to have a follow-up question with you so we can understand a little bit more. You said the honeybee is your favorite species. So what do you think about sort of that strategy that if I really want to save pollinators and I'm concerned about their decline, that I go and buy honeybee boxes and do backyard beekeeping in my own yard?
Well, first of all, hi, Jessica, and thank you again for having me. I had a really great time just putting the talk together, and I always love talking about, as you said, honeybees and what we do at UC Davis, not just in my lab, but in other labs that work on honeybees and native bees as well. And we definitely get a lot of questions just like that one. What do we do? How do we help save pollinators? Do we put more boxes or honeybee boxes and hives in our backyard? Do we become backyard beekeeper? And I think this is something that, of course, I would love to promote all the time, right? And just be like, hey, come on in and learn about honeybees and start your own backyard hive. But we really have to be so careful about what we're doing as a whole. And is that really helping all of the pollinators that are already present in the environment that we're in? And believe it or not, you probably are not even aware that your next door neighbor might even be a beekeeper. So when you start putting bees on top of bees, colonies on top of colonies, you might be really stressing the local resources out. And the bees that you have might not have resources that they need to flourish. And if you're a novice backyard beekeeper, it really is important to stress education. So if you do want to take that on, you have to get educated. And there are really excellent classes out there. Of course, at UC Davis, we provide those. But that's not necessarily what I would always just recommend. Go and be a beekeeper. What we really recommend is to plant forage, right? We're all talking about how helpful and useful and healthy nutrition is for honeybees and all the other pollinators as well. So if you do have some land and you really want to help pollinators as a whole, I would say plant some supportive pollinator plants. So those that produce nectar, produce pollen that will support not just honeybees, but again, all of the pollinators as a whole. So I think that would be my main and first recommendation.
Okay. And then as far as those plants that we select, are native plants better for, should I be selecting the native plants to my watershed unit?
So native plants can certainly be a little bit better for supporting the native bees, right? So there are obviously some that are specialists, so they will specialize on particular plants that they pollinate. So we would definitely recommend native plants. And if you are living in California, the native plants, for example, are much more suited for the environment that you are in. So again, regardless of where you are living, the plants that are native to your area are most likely to be more drought tolerant, for example, which is something that we really strive for in California and dry areas. And then those plants then also would provide forage for honeybees. So sort of everybody gets covered.
Thanks so much for coming to the Pollinator Power Party and sharing some of your research. I think this is a real treat. Most people, unless, so I came up to your garden and we did filming for the documentary that's called Power for Pollinators. And this, I can say the species you have up there are really amazing. We saw some really rare species in that garden that you have.
Absolutely. And that's just a half an acre garden that has sort of carefully selected pollinator supportive plants. So you can do a lot with a little.
Great. All right. Alina, thank you so much for coming to the party and sharing with everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Okay. That was some amazing content that we had today. If you haven't taken the poll questions, go in there and do that now. And let's check out some of the polling results for these questions. I know over 100 people took it. We checked just maybe 10, 15 minutes ago. It's an open poll, so you can still take this. So the question is, before the conversations that we've had at this pollinator party this week, did you assume that a good way to support pollinators was having honeybee boxes on your property or in your school or in your garden? So, okay, gosh. So I'm seeing the results live with you. So that's about a 50-50 split, almost, between yes, you assumed it, and no, you didn't. You guys are some smart cookies out there because I think that's a very common sort of assumption. I'm going to go all in on supporting pollinators. Let me get some bee boxes out here. So as we just heard from Alina, and also we had the conversation in the garden yesterday with Kelly Rourke, who's the president of Pollinator Partnership. We covered this also yesterday, if you missed that. Yeah, maybe just echoing with what Alina said. And also, I'm a conservation biologist. I study broader landscapes, not just specific species. And probably the best thing that you can do is to pick your native plants to your area, to your watershed unit. If you have a big state like Texas or California, look for plants that are specific to your watershed area and put those in. You put those native plants in that flower, that have pollen and nectar, and that is the best thing that you can do to support pollinators. If you're interested in beekeeping and you actually want to harvest the honey, take one of these master beekeeping classes and make sure that you're doing it well and thoughtfully, because there can be some unintended impacts for that. In terms of spreading a disease among honeybees. And if you do have a bee box, you provide food for those bees. Plant extra plants out there that support the nectar and pollen and flora resources that those honeybees are going to be needing to be healthy, right? Okay, awesome. Okay, next question. All right, so the next question, does it make sense that if you want to support pollinators, a good way is to grow flowering plants native to your region and minimize unnecessary herbicides? So everybody said yes. Wow, that really blew. That's like an easy question, right? Good thing there's not prizes for right answers. Yeah, that makes sense, right? We've been talking about that. This is now the third year of the Pollinator Power Party. I just mentioned it. This is really, that makes sense. So around this topic of herbicides, there is things in the chat today. This is a really common topic and question: is what is the appropriate use of herbicides within ecosystems and systems that you're trying to support biodiversity on? And in this case, it's invertebrates and pollinators. So I'm a conservation biologist. I am committed. This is like my life purpose, to be supporting ecosystems and the people that depend on them. And I'll say that there are times and places where there is an appropriate use of herbicides. Invasive species are tough. They are tough. And if you are trained and you know what you're doing, there are appropriate places where you use targeted treatment for herbicides. For example, with power companies in the rights of ways, they call them woodies, right? Stumps and woodies out there. They have to manage the growth and the canopy, so you have electricity and that it is safe and reliable. And in the process of doing that, it actually can create really, really good habitat for pollinators and other biodiversity out there. Right of ways is typically called an early successional stage of habitat sort of evolution and growth. It's maintained at kind of that early successional stage and creates these remarkable systems that just run through the landscape. Similar, now the topic that's really coming up for power companies is the transition to renewable energy and the new growth of solar that's being installed on landscapes, on the ground, on sometimes fallowed farmland, things like that. And that's something that we're kind of thinking about, is where do these land assets that electric power companies manage, which is just enormous, as we've discussed earlier this week. How can they support biodiversity? When does it make sense? And when does it not make sense? Can they do it in a way that doesn't impact and raise prices of electricity, right? And still is serving their underserved customers. So these are really good questions. We continue to talk about these things. This is a little bit of the deeper science sort of behind the curtains of what EPRI is doing. I just wanted to sort of give you a window into some of that. So join us, if we could close the poll. Tomorrow is lovely Lepidoptera. So tomorrow is so much fun. We have our scientists on, 3 scientists, and sometimes I have trouble controlling these scientists. You're going to see that come out tomorrow. So join us. If you're not sure if you know things about moths, or if you think you know everything, there's probably some things that we can all sort of learn together understanding how many moth species there are in the world relative to how many butterflies is pretty remarkable. And our welcome packets are still shipping to you. It has a lovely Lepidoptera ID sheet in there. So join us tomorrow. Don't forget to post to our hashtag Power and Pollinators. Help us meet our $2.5 million person reach goal this year so that we can run the party next year. All right. Until tomorrow, same time, same place. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.